sanctuary for you.
Good morning, Grandview. Good morning, friends. I'm Pastor Jane, and it is so nice to be with you this morning. Not too long ago, I finished a book called The Overstory. It was written by Richard Powers. Now, this is a novel, but it contains a tremendous amount of factual information about trees and how trees are interconnected through their root system. Trees communicate, they defend each other, and they care about each other. And what we see as individual trees above ground isn't even close to the entire story of how trees actually are. Nature and Earth itself have so many stories to tell us. Maybe this week, maybe especially this week, because today starts Earth Week and Wednesday is Earth Day, maybe we'll listen a little more closely to the stories that are being told all around us by nature. In the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah, a giant has lived quietly for the past 80,000 years. The trembling giant is an enormous grove of quaking aspens. But the grove is really a single organism. Each of the approximately 47,000 or so trees in the grove share a single root system. The individual trees aren't individuals, but stems of a massive single clone. We're all separated right now. Individual people and immediate families in our separate homes may lead us to believe and often even feel like we are alone, that we're not part of something bigger or something deeper, something grounded. But there is something in our root system, something in our rootedness, something that holds us together and connects us to each other, and that something is the gospel. The gospel that we live out in large part through the church. Now, my prayer is that the church, and specifically Grandview, will be a force of nature, that our shared root system, the scriptures, reason, tradition, and experience through the risen Christ and in community will be the place where we find our strength, hope, and even joy in the current time and in the time to come. So as you look at this grove of trees, or you look out the window, or you sit and listen quietly, please pray with me. God of mercy and grace and love, we trust you to be with us as we start a new week. A week that may not look like anything different than last week. The days may feel so very long, or they may just rush by. Keep us rooted and connected. As we venture out or stay in, keep us rooted and connected. As we communicate with each other in old ways or in new Zoom-like ways, keep us rooted and connected. As we care for our own needs, gently shake our limbs so that we can branch out to those who are struggling. As we ask for your mercy, may we be full of mercy. That keeps us rooted and connected. May your love and our love spread like trembling giants that grow ever deeper and ever wider. Amen.
Good morning, friends. Pastor Liz here, greeting you from my grandmother's beautiful garden on this gray, drizzly day, but it's Camp Sunday, and so here we are outside. I'll be bringing this morning's announcements. So as federal stimulus dollars arrive in your bank account or mailbox, if you find that you are one of the fortunate ones who needs this money less than others may, we invite you to consider donating a portion or all of that check to Grandview's new Fairness Fund. Now, this idea came to us by way of Dina and Dave Ament, who thought that it'd be more equitable to redistribute this assistance so that people with greater need would receive greater support. We'll be writing checks from this fund in a couple of ways. One way is to support Grandview members and friends who have had their work hours eliminated or reduced in some way. And if that sounds like you, then please do let us know if it would be helpful to you to receive support from this fund. We'll also be writing checks to support local organizations meeting emergent needs, and also using the fund to redress the way that coronavirus is unequally impacting already marginalized communities. Our e-alert has more to say about that, so do spend some time looking that over. Grandview also continues to have grocery cards available for purchase. You can just send a check to the church and we will mail you back the grocery card for your preferred store, or we'll deliver it to your house. And speaking of groceries, we continue to collect donations for our COVID-19 Meal Packs program. The full grocery list is available on the website, Facebook page, and also in the e-alert. Just a reminder that bags can be delivered weekdays between 8:30 and 2 p.m. and a reminder to wear gloves and masks in the preparation process and also in the delivery process too. You can email Kate if you have any questions about that. As a community, we've been really leaning into prayer as a means of maintaining and even creating new connections. So if you want to be a part of our prayer chain, email Dorothy Killebrew or Barb Smith, whose email addresses should be down here somewhere, and let them know you want to be on that prayer chain. And also be on the lookout in the e-alert next Wednesday morning for the Zoom login information to attend virtually our next prayer gathering, which will be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you're looking for new ways to connect, our weekly lectionary Zoom meeting is always welcoming new participants. So if you want to read the Bible in conversation with others and talk about it, do send me an email so that we can send you the Zoom information for that. Well, that's it for me. I'm praying that God's presence and peace and love is with you today and all throughout this week. Take care.
Lord of all creation, water, earth, and sky, heaven's iron tabernacle, glory to the Lord on high, God of wonders beyond the galaxy, you are holy, holy. Declares your majesty. You are holy, holy, Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth. I will celebrate the light as I stumble in darkness. I will call your name by night, God of wonders beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy, Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah, to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah, to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah, to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. God of wonders beyond our galaxy, you are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy,
this is Megan. I'm Matt. We're from Pocono Plateau Camp Retreat Center, and we are going to teach you how to sing Deep and Wide. Ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide.
Good morning, everyone. Miss Kate here, coming to you from my backyard. And we're gonna start off with our God-filled good morning before I tell you about why I'm with a tent in my backyard. So we're gonna count to 3, take a deep breath in, and then we're gonna yell it. And adults, I hope you're doing it too. So 1, 2, 3, deep breath. Good morning! And now God's filling our space and is all around us. Well, I'm going to tell you a little about why I'm in my backyard and why do I have a tent and why do I have some camping stuff like bug spray and I have a lantern and a coffee thermos. Well, this Sunday was supposed to be Camp Sunday at Grandview, and you might remember Camp Grandview Sundays before. This one looks a little different, just like most things right now. Our summer camps might not happen, who knows? Camps like Gretna Glen, Pocono Plateau, Inaba, Carson Simpson, which are United Methodist camps, sports camps, arts camps, scouting camps, and even our Camp Grandview might look a little bit different this year. They might have opportunities online. They might have opportunities by offering smaller group sizes or day camps. We really don't know, which is kind of sad. Well, camp might not be offering the same options, but we could still do camping in our own backyard, right? And we can still enjoy God's amazing creation by going on hikes, which many of you probably have been doing, by going boating, by just exploring a park when they're open, and also by camping in our backyard. Well, to get started today, I'm going to share a book with you. And this book is by a local artist who I went to college with, and he's an author, and his wife is actually an illustrator but did not illustrate this book, and they live in Lidditz. And I want to sidebar here and say that you should support your local artists and any other local businesses that you can. So I'm supporting one of my friends who's a local artist by reading his book. It's perfect for today too. Tiny T-Rex and the Very Dark Dark by Jonathan Stutzman. And the illustrations are by Jay Fleck. It is our first camp out in the backyard, and we are nervous. We have never slept outside before. We might be Mighty Beast. I am a Rex, Pointy is a Pointy, and Bob is my special squish squish. But even Mighty Beast gets scared if you can't sleep with our nightlights on. When I'm inside, the dark doesn't seem so dark. But when I am outside, the dark is very dark. Outside, there is no nighty lights to turn on. And when there are no nighty lights, the grumbles and zombies come out. Mother says there's always a light shining somewhere, Tiny, even in the dark. If you are brave and look hard enough, you will find it. It's so hard to be brave when you are scared of crawly creepies, and it's hard to look for something when you have your eyes shut. Pointy and I thought up a secret plan to be brave. When the very dark dark comes, we will be ready. First, we will build a hiding forge to hide our snacks, and ourselves, of course. I don't feel hidden, Tiny says. Next, we will make special helmets to protect our brains from the grumbles and the zombies. I need a bigger helmet. The next part of the plan is the most important. We must hurry. We are running out of time. The crawly creeps are closing in. Tap, 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 tap. I hear grumbles. They are close. Crunch, crunch. Run, Pointy. The zombies are here. This is it. Our secret plan. It's almost ready. Now we will not be scared of the dark because we have made a super bright nighty light. Click. Our plan did not work. The very dark has got us. I'm scared, Pointy is scared, Bob is scared, we're all scared together. Maybe we can be brave together. Brave enough to open our eyes and look very, very hard. And find some light. The end. So Tiny and Pointy were scared and decided to be brave together. And they even made it through the dark and were able to see the light. Well, this is something that we need to remember right now, because things seem kind of dark, a little bit scary and a little bit sad. But God's light and love can shine through. This is true at camp too. I personally have really connected with God in nature, and I've always grown up feeling connected and seeing God in nature. I grew up going to church camp and to do like scouting trips and really taking advantage of any time I can be outside. I loved it so much that I joined Pocono Plateau summer staff to also share God's love at church camp with other friends. And when I was little, I want to say elementary school, maybe middle school, I was at a worship campfire at Pocono Plateau, and I remember afterwards we laid out and watched the stars. It kind of looked like you were looking up at God's snow globe, and that he had painted and scattered beautiful stars across the sky. And then I felt a chill and I saw my first shooting star, and it felt like God had just waved at me. Being outside for me, and I know for so many others, really helps people connect to God. It's because God's living things are all around us, and our connection to living things connects us to the living God. In nature, you might have heard somebody say that when they go hiking, or when they hear the wind blowing, when they see a flower blooming, or a flower opening like last week in worship, that they see God and they experience God that way. Well, as you have probably heard, and I know adults have definitely heard, Jesus talks about images of nature, as does the early scriptures. We hear prophets talking about flowing water. Jesus talks about seeds that are planted. Well, this is really a connection to God and to living things. So I want you guys to go out in nature this week. Experience God's beauty. Go out and see a flower. Go out and sit quietly and listen to the wind. Hear the birds singing, maybe see different animals roaming. Also this week is Earth Week, and that means you could also try to make a difference in the world by going out and trying to clean up something, to take care of our earth, and to make God's beauty really shine. I encourage all of my friends in those dark moments to step outside and experience God, to try to see the light.
Picture this. That same day, 2 other disciples, not of the 11, are traveling the 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus. As they walk along, they talk back and forth about all that's transpired during the recent days. While they're talking, discussing, and conversing, Jesus catches up to them and begins walking with them. But for some reason, they don't recognize him.
You two seem deeply engrossed in conversation. What are you talking about as you walk along this road?
They stop walking and just stand there, looking sad. One of them, Cleopas is his name, speaks up.
You must be the only visitor in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about what's been going on over the last few days.
What are you talking about?
It's about the man named Jesus of Nazareth. He was a mighty prophet who did amazing miracles and preached powerful messages in the sight of God and everyone all around. Our chief priests and authorities handed him over to be executed. Crucified, in fact. We had been hoping that he was the one, the one who would liberate all of Israel and bring God's promises. Anyway, on top of all of this, just this morning, the 3rd day after the execution, some women in our group really shocked us. They went to the tomb early this morning and didn't see his body anywhere. Then they came back and told us that they did see something, a vision of heavenly messengers. And these messengers said that Jesus was alive. Some people in our group went to the tomb to check it out. Just as the women said, it was empty. But they didn't see Jesus.
Come on, people. Why are you being so foolish? Why are your hearts so sluggish when it comes to believing what the prophets have been saying all along? Didn't it have to be this way? Didn't the Anointed One have to experience the sufferings in order to come into his glory?
Then he begins with Moses and continues, prophet by prophet, explaining the meaning of the Hebrew scriptures, showing how they were talking about the very things that happened to Jesus. About this time, they are nearing their destination. Jesus keeps walking ahead, as if he has no plans to stop there, but they convince him to join them.
It's getting late, and soon it will be too dark to walk.
So he accompanies them to their home. When they sit down at the table for dinner, he takes the bread in his hands. He gives thanks for it, and then he breaks it and hands it to them. At that instant, 2 things happen simultaneously. Their eyes are suddenly opened, so they recognize him, and he instantly vanishes, just disappears before their eyes.
Amazing! Won't our hearts on fire within us while he has talking to us on the road.
So they get up immediately and rush back to Jerusalem, all 7 miles, where they find the 11 gathered together, the 11 plus a number of others. Before Cleopas and his companion can tell their story, the others have their own story to tell.
The Lord has risen indeed!
It's amazing! The Lord has risen indeed!
Then the 2 men report their own experience, their conversation along the road, their moment of realization and recognition as he broke the bread.
On the journey to Emmaus, with our hearts cold as stone, the one who would save us had left us alone. Then a stranger walks with us, and to our surprise, he opens our stories and he opens our eyes. And our hearts burned within us as we talked on the way, how all that was promised was ours on that day. So we begged him, stay with us and grant us your word. We welcomed the stranger and we welcomed table as he blessed and broke bread. We knew it was Jesus, arisen from the dead. Though he vanished before us, we knew he was near. The life in our dying and the hope in our fear. On the journey to Emmaus, in our stories and feast, with Jesus we claim that the greatest is least. And his words burn within us, let none be ignored. Who welcomes the stranger shall welcome the Lord.
Would you pray with me? Oh Lord, your word is very near to us. It is on our lips and in our hearts. So give us grace to hear it, to speak it, to taste it, and most of all, to live it. Amen. So the journey to Emmaus, a really familiar story about two disciples, not part of that inner circle. They weren't there at the Last Supper, but they are walking along the road, and it tells us about that journey and this stranger whom they encountered on the way. So here they are walking, and we often tell just the end of this story in preaching. We often talk about what happened when they recognized Jesus in the breaking of the bread. They don't recognize him at first. Maybe that was because they weren't part of that inner circle. They didn't know him as well, but they didn't recognize him by sight or by the sound of his voice, which, we tend to do with people we know well. And maybe that's a suggestion that our resurrected bodies are different from the bodies that we walk around with on earth somehow. That's a whole nother sermon. And so is the sermon about the end of the story. This sermon I want to preach today is about the beginning of the story, and it really struck me in the midst of this pandemic. This part about what happens as Jesus is first meeting them. So he comes near him. It says they didn't recognize him. And he says, "What are you discussing as you're walking along?" And it says they stood still, looking sad. I've been looking at two paintings from Linda Gaston, a watercolorist in our congregation this week. And one is Easter morning painting, and the colors in it are just so bright and magnificent. There's lots of pink and white and yellow, and it just exudes joy. But Linda also painted this scene from 3 days after Jesus' death, and these disciples walking along. Just notice the change in the color here, especially on the left side of the painting, where we first see the disciples out on the road. And they're almost gray, right? And the whole painting on that side is dark blues and purples. They stood still, looking sad. I like the way the hymn writer puts it, Marty Hahn. On the journey to Emmaus, with our hearts cold as stone, the one who would save us had left us alone. You can really feel the personal loss here. And in the hymn, there's a little bit of a suggestion of a second reason for the feeling of abandonment. The one who would save us had left us alone. And that's part of the conversation they have. So when Cleopas responds, he says, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there?" And you can hear the frustration maybe in his voice. He asked them, it says, Jesus asked them, what things have taken place? And they replied, the things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in word and in deed before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over, and he was condemned and to death. He was executed, crucified. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. So there's this hope that, Jesus was the one who was going to come and save. And that hope has been lost. In the midst of a time like the one in which we're living, one of the things we're experiencing is a loss of hope, and that is a component of grief that is really important to pay attention to and to name and recognize. And when we do, we can begin to heal from that grief. So I'm glad that the disciples expressed that. So I think there is some good news in that, in the recognition of what we are feeling as a familiar feeling that the Bible deals with. The story does continue to the story of the women seeing what happened, and then the breaking of the bread. And what I want to say about that is, last week we talked about see, that verb see, in the Easter story. But here, there's a recognition maybe in taste, and also in the experience of getting together. So, sure, they recognize this person somehow alive, and yet somehow different than before. And they recognize it in the communal eating of bread. They're eating with a group of people in a village, and they recognize that somehow Jesus is alive, not merely as a person, but in the ways that perhaps he continues to live among them. He lives in their hospitality with one another. He lives in the ways that they are able to be together and continue what he started on earth. The last verse of the On hymn says, "On the journey to Emmaus, in our stories and feast, with Jesus we claim the greatest is least, and his words burn within us. Let none be ignored. Who welcomes the stranger shall welcome the Lord." Pray with me again, would you? Oh Lord, your word is very near to us. It is on our lips. It is in our hearts. So give us grace to hear it, to speak it, to taste it, and most of all, to live it. Amen.
It only takes a spark to get a fire going. Soon all those around can hold on to its glowing.
out here to my garden ready for camp. I put on my lanyard with my name on it to remind myself that it only takes a spark, and I am one of those sparks. You are too. So go out into the world, listen to the sound of a brook babbling, and taste and see God wherever you go this week. Blessings, friends. Amen.